Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Brothers and sisters, may peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell, the Deputy Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, welcoming you to today's episode of CAIR on Air. Ramadan Mubarak to all of you. I hope you all are having a blessed month of worship. Today's program, as you all know, is about what we are all thinking about and waiting to learn about, and that is the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. The jury has been deliberating since yesterday in Minnesota. We are still waiting as of 3:03 p.m. Eastern time to receive a verdict. Obviously, there's no telling when we'll get a verdict, but so many people are watching this. So much is riding on this. So many people are concerned about not only this verdict and what it's going to mean for Minnesota, for our country, for people around the world, but also where we go from here. You know, no matter whether Derek Chauvin is found guilty, as he should be, or not, what are the long-term changes that have to be made to make sure that these incidents stop happening? We've seen this over and over again, even during the trial. And so to discuss these issues, I think there's no better group of people to have than the people on the ground in Minnesota, who we're going to welcome on momentarily. I want to note logistically, as always, that if you all have questions or comments, you can put those in the comments on Facebook. We'll try to take the questions at the end of the program, inshallah. And those of you who are listening through American Muslim 360, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free also to go online to post your comments there on Facebook so that we can respond to those and take your questions, inshallah. I now want to get right to it. I want to bring on our three special guests, all from the Minnesota chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, all doing great work to address issues of not only Islamophobia and bigotry, but police brutality, anti-Black racism, and criminal justice reform. Let's bring on our special guests. We have with us today Jailani Hussein, the Executive Director of CAIR Minnesota. We have Muhammad Ibrahim, the Deputy Director of CAIR Minnesota. And we have Zainab Muhammad, who is the Community Advocacy Manager of CAIR Minnesota. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know things are very busy in Minnesota. I know you all are waiting for the verdict, but you're not just waiting, you're doing work, right? Organizing the community, getting prepared for the next steps, whatever that has to be. So Jailani, I want to start with you as the Executive Director of CAIR Minnesota. For those of the people who maybe have not followed the trial closely, but they know what's going on, just give us a brief reaction, your thoughts on how the trial went. How do you think the prosecution did in laying out the case for Derek Chauvin's guilt? And then, inshallah, I'm going to ask all of you about how things are going in Minnesota right now.
Thank you, Edward. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Ramadan Kareem. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring the best of this month of Ramadan. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this moment to also help our community see the wisdom and the courage for us to build a more just society here in the United States. Derek Chauvin's case, as many people have been maybe monitoring from afar, has come to a conclusion. It was a very long case, trial, almost 3.5 weeks. The trial really began with seeing multiple video evidence of the killing from the beginning when George Floyd walked into the store until eventually when he was carried out on a stretcher when actually after he passed away. And it has been traumatizing for everybody who watched the video. And then we saw evidence of the bystanders who came out, many of them bravely coming out to stop this police brutality, but unfortunately we're not able to because the Derek Chauvin was not alone in this action. He had 3 other officers standing around, and 2 of them actually holding down George Floyd. And then we saw their testimony and how they tried to intervene. A firefighter who was off duty, who came in to help and even see if they could check the pulse and was denied. You know, a young man who's a security guard, but also is a trained martial arts and understood what Derek Chauvin was actually doing at the time, that he was doing a chokehold, that he was literally killing George Floyd. And then we saw, doctors explaining all the different aspects of what was going on. And many people may not remember this detail, but I remember it very well from the trial, where George Floyd literally fought for every breath, and he would move his knuckles, he would move his hands, he would move his shoulders, he would move his waist. And every time George Floyd tried to get another breath, Derek Chauvin continued to escalate his pressure. And what maybe many people did not see, they thought that he had one knee on the back of George Floyd, but actually the video evidence showed that he had his entire body on the top portion of his body while he was in a prone position, and not being able to move. So this was one of the worst killings you could ever imagine. And we initially knew 8 minutes and 46 seconds, but actually the trial showed that it was more than that. It was over 9 minutes and 29 seconds where George Floyd laid on the ground, gasping for air, demanding while he did it, crying out for his mom, and also saying it politely, please, please, I can't breathe. But he was met with the force of Derek Chauvin and those other officers. So it was a very traumatic case. I think the prosecution did an amazing job. And again, it's a sad but reality that, in this case, the prosecution had more resources to their disposal, more volunteer support from lawyers who wanted to help in this matter. And they had some of the best lawyers really arguing the case. And we also saw for the first time first time ever, I think, a lineup of police officers from the chief and others who came out and actually talked about that what Derek Chauvin was doing was not something that was acceptable by the police department, and he did not follow protocol. But many of us believe that break of the blue wall of silence is temporary, that it may have not come if it didn't have this amount of attention on this case. And then finally, we saw the defense, and the defense really didn't have a bigger play. They really focused on a medical witness who could not even declare that he was killed choking or asphyxia or any of those other points that were mentioned. Eric could not really rebuke that. And there was no really other witnesses other than to try to use other factors like drugs or anything like that as a probable cause for his death. But I think the closing arguments were testimony of really what this case is about. And I think that one of the lead attorneys mentioned reminding the jury to believe what they saw. And I think that's the truth behind this case, is that those video evidence that we saw is what really moved the world, moved all of us, demanding justice for George Floyd and all the other families who have been stolen, who have their lives been stolen away from them by police violence. So, it's sad, but that's the reality. And so we are hopeful. We're optimistic in the sense to say that we hope that we will get a guilty verdict on all charges. But we still also know that it's not over. And so Dante Wright, a young 20-year-old, was killed 12 miles from when the trial is happening right now in Minneapolis. And on the last week of the trial, as it was coming to a conclusion, nobody was even focused on the trial. They're all focused in the recent killing of Dante Wright. And that, I think, killing is a testament to your second question about what's next. What are we? Is a guilty verdict inside the courthouse going to save Dante Wright? Going to save another life, Dolal Eid and others? So that's a little bit of a summary of the trial for those folks who maybe did not get a chance to review it.
Now, that was an excellent summary. Thank you so much. And I want to note that, second, what you said, the prosecution did an excellent job, right? I mean, they really left nothing to chance, right? You could have just played the video and arguably stopped there, but they really got into the meat of things to leave really no room for reasonable doubt. And that was their job. We want to thank Attorney General Keith Ellison for assembling that prosecutorial team. They did a great job. No matter what happens with this verdict, I think we can all agree they served the case well, they served the community well, and they served the country well in the case that they put on. Zainab, let me go to you. Tell us about what the environment is like right now, because we're all around the country, I think, a little nervous. I just saw one of my parents who wanted to check in and see what the latest news is. I think everyone is watching this with bated breath, right? But in Minnesota, on the ground there, with so many activists, community members, the family, other victims of this violence who are there to support, what's it like on the ground there? What's just been the feeling like for the community?
Yeah, I think it's heavy. I think people are sitting on the edge of their seat, kind of waiting for some kind of a verdict to come through. And I think part of that is because one, the murder that just happened with Dante, right? So people have been on this week, especially have been on the streets, kind of demanding for justice inside and outside the courtroom, because they have an understanding that with a verdict in this case, which hopefully would end with a guilty on all charges, would mean reopening other cases. And so we're working with family members as well as people in the community, and people are just sitting on the edge of their seats, kind of like wait. I think every hour we're looking at the news for anything that might come through. And so it's a lot of worrisome. I think there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in the community that obviously don't have a lot of faith in the justice system. So we're just hoping this time it serves us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sentiment is shared across the country. Mohammed, let me turn it to you now. So, in terms of not only the trial itself and the community's reaction to that, but what happens next? What are some of the? I mean, if he's found guilty, I mean, I'm sure everyone will breathe a sigh of relief, right? That at least that bit of justice was done. But what are some of the things the community is fighting for in Minnesota, some of the structural policy changes that you all have been advocating for to make sure that these types of incidents stop happening?
Yeah, I think, first of all, assalamu alaikum wa jazakallah khair for allowing some time to spend some time with us this afternoon. And I think that while we wait for the Floyd family to get justice in the courtroom, we still need to fight for justice outside of the courtroom. And we've been, on the ground really trying to push some policies, across the state of Minnesota. And it's really been falling on, deaf ears, if you will. We haven't really been able to really push the envelope in a way that you would think that, in the state where George Floyd, was lynched in a modern day fashion, would actually take this opportunity to actually get some, police accountability measure passed. It's been really kind of stagnant, and and unfortunately we've been told in meetings that that the state was like verbatimly more interested in keeping the state blue than pushing police accountability measures, because certain officials would not be able to vote for this without losing their seats, and they couldn't really risk that, right? So it's been that's been kind of like the atmosphere leading up to the unfortunate murder of Dante, right? And then now all of a sudden everybody's really, really interested on pushing and working for police accountability measures. So some of the policies that we've been really pushing for are really nonsensical, extremely, common sense, pragmatic, nothing that's like kind of out of this world's realm, right? We're asking for basic things like, ending statute of limitations that only allows families to grieve, learn how to fight, and fight within 3 years, right? We want to just get rid of that provision and say, hey, if you've been murdered at the hand of of law enforcement or during critically involved incidents or whatever the case is, there shouldn't be a time limit on how long you can bring forth a case, right? Ending the justification for qualified immunity, and just putting that to a stop when it comes to police officers, pushing things where families should have the ability to find out how their loved ones died at the hands of police within 48 hours, right? Pushing, simple nonsensical policies like that is what the state really, really needs. And it might not be a silver bullet to ending, police violence in the communities, but we feel like this is a necessary first step, and as we have seen with county prosecutors, and Minnesota has this really weird system where if And if a citizen or a resident of Minnesota dies in the hands of police in one jurisdiction within that county, then that county does not have the ability to bring forth charges or investigate the case. They have this ability where they would recommend this case amongst 4 or 5 counties, and then somebody would step up and take the case. And that system has really failed to bring forth any meaningful charges. And we see another example in the case of Dante Wright, where when other cases as well, like there weren't any charges even brought forth. And there's another Muslim young black Somali man that was murdered at the hands of police in December, literally 6 blocks away from where George Floyd, from 38th in Chicago. And we haven't even had cases being brought forth in that case whatsoever. And matter of fact, the attorney prosecutor that took that case ended up retiring 2 months after taking it. So we really need to remove this system and implement an independent and prosecutory body that does not have any relationship with law enforcement. Because if you look at a lot of these, county prosecutors, they are, heads of the Minneapolis Peace, or the Minnesota Peace Officers Association, or they have this relationship with this sheriff and so on and so forth. And they actually rely on police in their jurisdiction to investigate themselves. So we really need to, it doesn't make sense to have the police investigate the police and bring charges on the police. We need to have an independent system that is on the outside, that brings forth charges and actually investigates, what is going on. And as we kind of, wait for this verdict, I think it was really testament to the failure that we all have failed collectively. That while we're waiting on, probably one of the biggest cases in American history, we're waiting for this verdict to come out that, that another man, a young black man, was murdered right here in the state of Minnesota. But the thing that we are really hopeful about was that through the experience that we have gained in the many years, because unfortunately Dante Wright wasn't the first, and hopefully is the last murder that happens in the state of Minnesota. But there has been others before him, like Jamar Clark. You have George Floyd, you have Dalal Eid, you have Isaac Aiden, you have so many others as well. And through that experience, the activists and the community really were the ones that were able to know what rooms to be in and how to really apply pressure. And it was the people that actually got the city manager removed, because they have a complicated system where the mayor is not in charge of the police department, the city manager is, and the city manager can only hire or can only fire the police chief. And we were able to work to get the city manager removed, with the city council and the mayor, and then ultimately the police officer and the police chief resigned before they were able to be let go. So it was, the testament of what the people together working could actually do in Minnesota, and hopefully this can translate across the nation.
And what's remarkable is, and you're talking about the Dante Wright shooting, that happened very quickly. The resignation of the chief, the officer, the city manager, and rapid response. So, and then not to mention they released the video very quickly and didn't dispute, what we all saw. Sometimes when this happens, they'll him and Han say, well, yeah, it looks like this, but, withhold judgment. Very quickly, everyone seemed to acknowledge, that what our eyes were showing was true. So I wonder, have things changed for the positive in that sense? Do you feel like police departments and prosecutors are aware they've got to take these things more seriously? I mean, maybe not taking it seriously enough, but have you seen any positive change in terms of how law enforcement and prosecutors have reacted to the shootings that have occurred since George Floyd? Or do you think, we are still dealing with kind of the same hard-headedness that has gotten us into the situation over and over again? Jaylani, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the biggest change is that more people from the public are willing to no longer accept the narrative of the police department, and also are willing to show up on the streets and actually see what's going on, pull their cameras out, record it, and ask questions. I don't know about the justice system. I don't know about police sharing videos, because we have seen in the Dalal Eid case, they shared one video, but that video only showed a split second of what was going on, could not really provide more information. And so I still do not trust the police departments to share videos. In the Dante Wright case, I think the reality is that there was already pressure. We were already building pressure around the George Floyd trial, so they had to share the information as fast as possible. because they were afraid that the people who were already demanding justice for George Floyd, not only were going to show up, but they're going to put a lot of pressure for why they did not share the video. And sadly, the video, you're right, the video evidence in this case is horrifying for a 26-year veteran to say that she pulled a taser. When she pulled the gun, and there's a clear difference between a taser and a gun, not only weight, color, size, everything. And also her hesitant to immediately use force against a young kid, a 20-year-old kid who was afraid and was actually talking to his mom on the phone. And they knew that. They told him to put the phone down, you know, so he was not a threat to them at any point. And so I think the community is more alert. I think the justice system is responding, but it may only respond to cases where the attention is pretty high. And that's what I'm really concerned about.
Right, that you have to have someone end up getting shot on camera and the community outrage to get action. I mean, very concerning. Let me answer a few questions from the chat, and then we'll go through one final round. So one question was, does anyone know how soon until we hear a verdict? No way of knowing. I think they are allowed to deliberate at least between 9 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. So any time within that period in Minnesota time, it's possible. And if they're close, I suspect the court might allow them to go even later than that if they feel like they're close. So really, it could be any time. That's why I'm sitting here, I'm checking my TV just to make sure I don't see anything. Will the verdict be announced live? Yes, it will be announced live. So one of the things that's been, I think, beneficial about this trial is that it was broadcast live. And that does not happen with every trial. It's not required, but oftentimes, in prominent cases, reporters, the community will ask the court to allow the trial to be televised, and the court has the discretion. And in this case, Judge Cahill allowed the trial to be televised, and I think that was absolutely the right decision. I mean, this is a story of national and international significance, and full transparency, I think, is key. So yes, it will be announced live, inshallah. And the question, do you think he'll be charged with murder? So I think maybe they were talking about the case of Dante Wright. I believe the officer in that case had been charged with manslaughter, and it's possible more charges could be added later. Now, so as we got 5 minutes left. So let me go back around to Zainab. So Zainab, what has CAIR been trying to do on these issues in the community? Many people think of CAIR as, well, we deal with anti-Muslim bigotry, and then on the side we help deal with issues like racism, police brutality, black issues, but those are Muslim issues, right? A significant number of Muslims in America, especially going back to the 60s, 50s, and earlier, Muslims are black, right? Racism, police brutality impact Muslims as much, if not more, than anyone else. And even if these issues didn't impact our community, we still have an obligation to care about them because of the very fact that we are Muslim. So what role has the Muslim community been trying to play in Minnesota in addressing these issues, and what role can they play going forward, inshallah?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that we've been doing through CAIR, as well as the larger Muslim community in the state of Minnesota. We've been passing bills, or trying to pass bills. So we've got a number of police accountability bills at the Minnesota House, 9 of them, which I think, Mohammed, if you have it pulled up, it'd be awesome if you can share them. And then we've also been boots on the ground consistently, whether it was George Floyd, as well as Dante Wright, Dalal Eid, all of the cases. So what that means, we've been helping organize the protests. We've been engaging the community, as well as many other ways any way that we've been able to engage in the community, we have been, because ultimately we're also a civil rights organization. So any violation to a human right, we're always there consistently as CAIR MN.
Yeah, absolutely. Mohammed, tell us about, I think Zainab mentioned some of the bills. I think you've already told us a bit about the policy you're working on, but if you want to share any more detail, feel free. And I want to ask you this. You've seen so many cases now in Minnesota. What advice do you have for other communities around the country who are trying to advance positive reform of our criminal law system and or trying to address incidents of police brutality? Any advice you want to share with other communities around the country based on your experiences?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that, and this is something that Jelani says all the time, and when it comes to elected officials specifically, is that don't look for their sympathies anymore. You need to ask them for solutions, and those solutions have to be policy minded, right? So it's the policies and it's the legislation that allows on some of these things. And what's unique about the state of Minnesota is that we actually have legislation that prohibits us from getting accountability, right? And so a part of the work that we're doing is we're trying to dismantle, we're trying to strike language in the legislature that, for example, do not allow civilian oversight committees. So civilian oversight committees of overseeing the police do not have the ability to investigate or to even subpoena. Right. And so we're working to try to get that language, for example, like, struck. And there are other languages as well that criminalize even reporting police misconduct. Right. So that something like that is actually something that is terrifying. So if a police officer has done you wrong and you go to a police station, you will see that on the form, it will list the statute that says, hey, if you lie, you will get XYZ, or, so that might be a strong deterrent for people to even report police misconduct, right?
They might be.
So those are some of the things that we're working on as well. And also we're working on another bill with Communities United Against Police Brutality that they're really championing this bill, and is ending, ending police-only response to mental health crisis calls. So over 50% of, dispatch calls are, mental health, awareness checks and so on and so forth. But a majority of the cases that result in critical incidents or death are from, that started off as potentially a mental health wellness check. So ending, police only response to make sure that there are, mental health professionals that are responding to those calls. And also there are other initiatives that are coming out, especially that are being addressed and talked about, and even in the city of Minneapolis right now. And that is even ending, officers, carry, they're not, shouldn't have the ability to carry firearms when going into a non-felony or minor.
Can I interrupt you briefly, Mohammed? We have a verdict. The jury has reached a verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial already, less than 24 hours. I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to say my hope is this is positive news.
Inshallah.
I think so, but we'll see shortly, inshallah. Finish your thought, and then we'll wrap the programs. I know we all have to go get ready to see the verdict. Finish your thought.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think just to wrap up to everybody, I think it's really important to mobilize. It's really important to get organized, and to that a part of the process is to hold your elected officials accountable, to make sure that they are putting your the things that you care about at most. And at this current moment, when it comes to police accountability measures, that we really need, that sometimes we might not even get the full justice, but the best thing that we can push for is to hold individuals that police officers accountable for their misgrievances or for their actions. So I would just push to everybody to organize, strategize, and also action alerts really well. Send out emails and get people to mobilize around making sure that we dismantle and get some accountability.
Absolutely. So this is so important. I think, again, we can't predict what the verdict is going to be, but I think one of the big concerns we had was that it would be a mistrial, that there'd be maybe one holdout. And that's what happened in the Michael Slager trial. That was in South Carolina. This is an officer who was caught on camera shooting Walter Scott in the back, I think 8 times, or shooting at him 8 times. I mean, it was clear as it doesn't get any clearer. And there was one juror that refused to vote guilty, and that trial was hung. And Slager ended up pleading guilty to federal charges. So we can now at least rest comfortably that not a mistrial. We have a verdict. We have an outcome. I'm hoping we're going to get some positive news shortly, inshallah. Jaylani, let me close with giving you the final remarks here. I know we all have to go. Final remarks you want to share before we go to find this verdict, inshallah.
Well, I think this is something we've been saying. I don't want everybody to put a lot of hope in just one verdict. We have to really end police brutality. We have to do something. We have to solve this issue. Otherwise, we will be back to courtrooms like this, demanding justice and for the right verdict. So I think if we get the right verdict, I think it'll be a relief. But I think the work has to continue, and that's what we need to do.
Absolutely. This is a step in the process, and inshallah, we hope we get positive news today, but it doesn't end the struggle. And if we don't get positive news today, the struggle still continues, inshallah. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be talking to you soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. And all you watching at home, thank you for joining us for today's episode of CAIR on Air. We greatly appreciate it. As I just mentioned, we have a verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. We are now waiting to see what that verdict will be. It should be announced shortly live. So, may Allah grant a just outcome, and may Allah protect the people of Minnesota and guide us all right in all matters of life. Ramadan Mubarak to all of you. Inshallah, we'll see you back here Thursday at 3 o'clock. where I assume we'll be discussing this more, inshallah, and discussing what we can do to advance the struggle for justice in this country, inshallah. Until then, assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.